The smell of antiseptic in old medical journals. That's what I remember most about the morning I realized I'd been slowly poisoning myself for 20 years. I'm Dr. Eleanor Banks. I've been practicing internal medicine for 4 decades, and I almost killed myself with breakfast cereal. The irony wasn't lost on me when I couldn't lift my medical bag without my hands shaking. At 68, I thought muscle weakness was just part of aging. I was wrong, dead wrong. And the foods I'd been recommending to my patients? The same ones that nearly cost me my independence. 5 foods, all labeled healthy, all destroying muscle tissue faster than age ever could. My story isn't pretty. But if you're over 60 and you've noticed your strength slipping away, you need to hear this. Because what I discovered changed everything. Not just for me, but for every patient who walked through my office door after that terrible Tuesday morning when I couldn't open a prescription bottle. Let me start with the morning that broke me. March 15th, 2019. I remember the date because it was written on the pharmacy bottle I couldn't open. Mrs. Henderson, 82 years old, diabetic, needed her insulin adjusted. Simple procedure. I'd done it thousands of times. But when I reached for that bottle, my fingers felt like they belonged to someone else. Weak, trembling, useless. The plastic cap might as well have been welded shut. I used both hands. Then I tried gripping it with a towel. Nothing. I sat there in my office, surrounded by medical degrees and awards, defeated by a child-proof cap. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. But here's the thing about being a doctor. We're terrible patients. We ignore symptoms in ourselves that we'd immediately diagnose in others. I'd been ignoring the signs for months, maybe years. The morning struggle to lift my coffee mug, the way I had to use both hands to turn my car key, how I'd started avoiding the second floor of my house because the stairs left me breathless. I'd convinced myself it was normal aging. After all, I was eating all the right foods, or so I thought. Every morning, the same routine. Steel-cut oats with fresh blueberries, skim milk, whole grain toast with low-fat margarine, Greek yogurt, orange juice. The breakfast of health-conscious Americans everywhere. The breakfast I'd recommended to thousands of patients over the years. The breakfast that was slowly destroying my muscle mass. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the weeks that followed that pharmacy bottle incident. I started paying attention to my body in ways I hadn't since medical school. The weakness wasn't just in my hands. My legs felt heavy climbing stairs. My back ached after standing for more than 20 minutes. I'd catch myself using furniture to steady myself when I walked. Little things, subtle changes. The kind that creep up so slowly you don't notice until they're not little anymore. I scheduled tests, blood work, metabolic panels, protein levels. Everything came back normal. My colleagues suggested physical therapy, maybe some strength training. Use it or lose it, they said. So I tried, 3 times a week at the local gym. Basic exercises, light weights. I felt ridiculous. A 68-year-old doctor struggling with 5-pound dumbbells while college kids pressed their body weight. But I persisted. After 8 weeks, nothing had changed. If anything, I felt weaker, more tired. The morning after workouts, I could barely get out of bed. My trainer, a young man named Jake, who was patient with seniors, suggested I might need more protein. Eat more lean chicken, he said, more fish, maybe some protein powder. I was already eating plenty of protein. or so I thought. Chicken breast for lunch, salmon twice a week, those Greek yogurt containers promising 15 grams of protein per serving. I was checking all the boxes, following all the rules, and still wasting away. The breaking point came during my annual physical. Dr. Martinez, my physician for the past 15 years, was concerned about my muscle mass. "Eleanor," he said, using the tone doctors reserve for difficult conversations, "you've lost 12 pounds since last year, most of it muscle." He recommended more tests, a nutritionist, maybe a geriatrician who specialized in age-related muscle loss. I almost laughed. Here I was, a doctor who'd spent decades treating age-related conditions, and I was becoming a textbook case myself. That night, I did something I rarely did. I went home and researched my own condition, not from medical journals or textbooks, but from patient forums, real people describing what I was experiencing. That's where I found something that changed my perspective entirely. Most people walk away when stories get this personal. The fact that you're still here listening to a doctor admit she was stumbling in the dark, that means something. Subscribe if you want to hear how this ends, because what I discovered next will challenge everything you think you know about healthy eating after 60. The patient forums led me down a rabbit hole I never expected. Story after story of people over 60 experiencing sudden muscle weakness despite eating healthy diets, despite exercise, despite doing everything right according to conventional wisdom. And buried in these stories, I found a pattern. 5 foods, always the same 5 foods. Foods that every nutrition guideline recommended. Foods that appeared on every healthy aging list. Foods that I ate every single day. The first clue came from a man in Oregon, retired teacher. Started losing muscle mass at 65. Tried everything. Then he mentioned something his grandson's nutritionist had told him about antinutrients. Compounds in foods that actually prevented nutrient absorption. I'd heard of anti-nutrients in medical school, but they were always presented as minor concerns, theoretical problems that didn't affect real-world nutrition. I was about to learn how wrong that assumption was. Anti-nutrients aren't just theoretical. After 60, when our digestive systems are already compromised, they become major roadblocks to muscle maintenance. And the foods highest in anti-nutrients? The exact foods I'd been eating every morning for 20 years. Steel-cut oats. Rich in phytic acid, which binds to minerals like zinc and magnesium. Essential minerals for muscle protein synthesis. Every morning I was essentially creating a mineral deficiency with my first meal of the day. Whole grain toast, more phytic acid, plus lectins, which can damage intestinal walls and reduce protein absorption. The very foundation of my healthy breakfast was preventing my body from using the protein I ate later in the day. Greek yogurt. This one surprised me. Yogurt is supposed to be healthy, right? But commercial Greek yogurt is often loaded with added sugars and processed with methods that destroy beneficial bacteria while concentrating inflammatory proteins. My daily yogurt wasn't supporting my digestive health. It was compromising it. Skim milk, the low-fat choice that health authorities had recommended for decades. But removing fat from milk doesn't just remove calories. It removes fat-soluble vitamins essential for muscle health. Vitamins A, D, E, and K. Without these vitamins, protein synthesis becomes inefficient. My body couldn't build muscle even when I gave it adequate protein. Orange juice. The breakfast staple I'd recommended to countless patients for vitamin C. But commercial orange juice is essentially liquid sugar with a few vitamins added back. High sugar intake creates inflammation and insulin resistance. Both are muscle killers after 60. 5 foods. My entire breakfast routine. Every single item was working against muscle maintenance. I was starting each day by sabotaging my body's ability to maintain strength and independence. The research was overwhelming once I knew what to look for. Study after study showing how these common foods affected nutrient absorption in older adults, how they created inflammatory responses that accelerated muscle breakdown, how they interfered with the hormonal signals necessary for muscle protein synthesis. But here's what made it worse. I wasn't just eating these foods. I was eating them together. The phytic acid from oats and whole grains was binding with minerals from other foods. The sugar from orange juice was creating insulin spikes that prevented fat burning and muscle recovery. The processed yogurt was introducing inflammatory compounds that my compromised digestive system couldn't handle efficiently. It was a perfect storm of nutritional sabotage, and I'd been creating this storm every morning for 2 decades. The revelation was both devastating and hopeful. Devastating because I realized how much damage I'd unknowingly caused to my own body, how many patients I'd given the same destructive advice to over the years. But hopeful because it meant the solution wasn't complex medical interventions or expensive treatments. It was as simple as changing what I ate for breakfast. I read something that changed everything. It said patience after 60 is the fastest way to die forgotten. My doctor said, wait. I stopped waiting. That guide is in the description below. The next morning, I didn't eat oats. I didn't have toast or yogurt or skim milk or orange juice. Instead, I had 3 eggs scrambled in butter, with a side of bacon and half an avocado. Foods that would have horrified the nutritionist version of myself from 6 months earlier. High fat, high cholesterol, everything I've been taught to avoid. But also high in bioavailable nutrients, complete proteins with all essential amino acids, healthy fats that supported vitamin absorption and hormone production. No anti-nutrients to interfere with mineral uptake. The difference wasn't immediate, but it was noticeable. By the end of the first week, I wasn't reaching for furniture to steady myself. The brain fog that I'd attributed to normal aging started lifting. My energy levels, which had been declining for years, began to stabilize. After 2 weeks, I could open prescription bottles without assistance. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. By the first month, I was carrying my medical bag without thinking about it, climbing stairs without being winded, standing for entire patient appointments without back pain. The changes were gradual but undeniable. My body was rebuilding itself from the inside out. The real test came at my 3-month follow-up with Dr. Martinez. He was shocked. "Eleanor, you've gained 8 pounds, he said, checking my chart twice. But your waist measurement is smaller. Your blood pressure is better. Your inflammatory markers are down. What changed?" I told him about the 5 foods, about the anti-nutrients, about how everything we'd been taught about healthy aging nutrition was backwards for many people over 60. He listened with the skepticism of a good physician. Then he asked for the research I'd compiled. 2 weeks later, he called. "I've been reading your materials," he said, "and I've started changing my breakfast routine. My wife thinks I've lost my mind, but I feel better than I have in years." That was the beginning of what I now call my second medical education. Learning not just what the body needs to thrive after 60, but what it needs to avoid. The foods that accelerate aging versus the foods that support regeneration. The difference between surviving into old age and thriving through it. The 5 foods I eliminated weren't just harming my muscles, they were affecting every system in my body. My sleep improved when I stopped the evening blood sugar spikes from residual inflammation. My joint pain decreased as the chronic inflammation subsided. My mental clarity sharpened as my brain received proper fuel instead of constant sugar crashes. Even my skin began to look healthier as my body's repair mechanisms started functioning efficiently again. But the most significant change was psychological. For the first time in years, I felt like I was aging forward instead of just aging. Like my body was an ally rather than an adversary. Like 70, 80, even 90 could be years of strength and independence rather than decline and dependence. I started sharing this information with my patients, carefully, gradually, always with the caveat that individual responses vary and medical supervision is important. But the results spoke for themselves. Patient after patient reported similar experiences. Increased energy, better sleep, improved strength and mobility, reduced inflammation markers in their blood work. Mrs. Henderson, the diabetic patient whose prescription bottle had started this whole journey, was one of the first to make the changes. Within 6 months, her blood sugar was more stable. Her medication requirements decreased. She was walking 2 miles a day instead of struggling to get from her car to my office. "Doctor," she said during one appointment, "I feel like I got my life back." I knew exactly what she meant. The medical literature is slowly catching up to what many of us discovered through experience. Research on antinutrients in aging populations. Studies on the inflammatory effects of processed grains. Data on how low-fat dairy affects nutrient absorption in older adults. The science is there. It's just buried under decades of nutritional dogma that assumed all bodies respond the same way to the same foods, regardless of age or metabolic condition. After everything I learned, everything I experienced, I found the 60-year rule. It has 9 rules that explain exactly why everything I believed was wrong after 60. It changed how I see my health, my patients, my entire approach to aging. It's all in the description below. Don't wait as long as I did. Today at 68, I'm stronger than I was at 58. My muscle mass is back. My energy is sustainable. My confidence in my body's ability to carry me through the next decades is restored. I still practice medicine, but now I practice it with the wisdom of someone who almost lost everything to conventional wisdom. The 5 foods I eliminated were oats, whole grain bread, Greek yogurt, skim milk, and orange juice. Foods that millions of people over 60 eat every day, believing they're making healthy choices. Foods that may be slowly undermining their strength, their independence, their quality of life. I'm not saying these foods are poison for everyone. I'm not suggesting that avoiding them will reverse all effects of aging. But I am saying that if you're over 60 and you're experiencing unexplained muscle weakness, chronic fatigue, or a general sense that your body is failing you, it might be worth examining what you're eating for breakfast. Your body after 60 has different needs than it did at 40, different tolerances, different requirements. The nutrition advice that served you well in midlife might be the very thing that's accelerating your decline in later life. It took me 20 years to figure this out, 20 years of slow deterioration that I attributed to inevitable aging, 20 years of giving advice to patients that may have been harming rather than helping them. I can't get those years back, but I can share what I learned. I can tell you that strength after 60 is possible, that independence well into your 80s and 90s isn't just a dream, that your body, given the right fuel and freed from the wrong foods, has a remarkable ability to rebuild and regenerate even late in life. The antiseptic smell is still here in my office. The medical journals still line my shelves, but everything else has changed. I'm still Dr. Eleanor Banks. I still practice medicine, but now I practice it with the knowledge that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop doing what everyone says is healthy. Sometimes the most radical act is simply changing what you eat for breakfast. And sometimes the difference between aging gracefully and aging miserably comes down to 5 simple foods. Foods you can stop eating today. Foods that might be the key to getting your strength back. Foods that changed my life and might just change yours too.